Okay, resetters, this is a good video. I really want to dive into a sensitive topic, and I think it's not being discussed enough. So I really wanted to come to you all with a video on it and really help us rethink it. And it's around addiction. Specifically on this video, I want to talk about food addiction, because I do believe that food addiction becomes this crazy hurdle when we fast. But more importantly, there's a dopamine addiction that can happen where when you fast, all of a sudden it's very difficult to fast because you need that dopamine. So we're going to dive in and talk about what that is. And I've got 5 different strategies for you on how to make sure that you get the results with fasting and that any kind of addiction you're able to overcome while in the fasted state. Because as many of you are discovering, that I discovered years ago, and I'm teaching you all here, is that fasting is really miraculous. I mean, there's a lot of really cool reasons we want to fast. But what happens when that addiction gets you, is a hurdle for you and takes you off track? We want to make sure we keep you on track. So let's dive. At the heart of addiction, I want to say this through a neurochemical lens. And I also want to share, I am not an addiction specialist, but I do know neurochemicals very, very well. And I will tell you that with food addiction, it's a dopamine addiction. And I mentioned that earlier. It is literally, you want the dopamine of food. That can be a part of it. Some of us eat because we're trying to keep traumas down. We are fill ourselves up. When we feel empty, it triggers a lot of things. But one piece of this is a dopamine addiction. So the first thing that I want to emphasize is that if you're fasting, you have a food addiction, and you're not being able to stay on track, you got to start off with a really, really, really good why. Why are you fasting? What do you want? It needs to be such a strong why that when that food addiction grabs you and is like, go eat, your why says no, because I want this thing more than I want this food. That's what a why can do for you. And I will tell you that one of the most beautiful stories of all the millions of people I've seen fast came from a young man named Todd. I've shared his story several times here. He's given me permission to share the story, but what was really interesting in Todd's journey is that when he came to me, he was like 300 pounds, such a beautiful man. He asked for my help, and he said, I really need to lose weight. And I said, well, what do you think the biggest block is? Like, why can't you lose weight? And he goes, oh, that's easy, I'm addicted to food. And I said, okay, well, what foods are you addicted to? And he was like, well, soda, all the wrong ones, buffalo wings, French fries, Western diet. And I said, well, what have you tried to overcome those addictions? And he rambled off a bunch of things that he failed at. So with that in mind, my thought was like, well, I'm not coming at his weight loss from food. I need to come at it from fasting. And that story I've told in other videos. And he's, by the way, down a year later, 120 pounds. But the second question I asked Todd was, tell me, Todd, why you want to lose weight. Because when it comes to food addiction, this is important. We have to have this big why. And you know what his why was? I have to stay alive for my family. Think about that why. Put yourself in Todd's shoes for one moment. The man is living in a body that he knows he needs to get better and heal. He can't overcome this food addiction. And every time he looks at his wife and children, he's reminded that if he doesn't do something, that he will die and leave them without a father and without a husband. That is a big why. Which is why Todd was able to drop this weight. And I can tell you, after a year of teaching him a fasting lifestyle, and he dropped this 120 pounds, I asked him, this was like a month ago, I asked him, okay, what's your why now? And his why is that he wants to be in a Christmas card photo with his family. He wants to be proud of a Christmas card photo. He and his family standing there with joy on his face, sending it out to all his friends. Like, that is a cool why. So if you are trying to stay on course with your fasting, if you're trying to overcome a food addiction, we've got to put the why at the center of this conversation. Build that big why. Okay, second part of this conversation, or the second thing I want you to think about, is if food addiction is a dopamine addiction, and there's some really interesting ways that I think this shows up. There was a beautiful movie years ago. It was called What the Bleep Do We Know? Anybody ever see that? It was like the first movie that actually launched Dr. Joe Dispenza into the world. And in What the Bleep Do We Know, they showed they had all this whimsical ways of showing the neurons in our brain. And it showed that when somebody goes to reach for like a chocolate cake, that actually The dopamine response happens before they even put the food in their mouth. Crazy. So just thinking about the food is giving you that dopamine. So one of the things that I have found that gives me dopamine is novelty. Dopamine loves novelty. It loves new things. So when you are doing new things all over and over again, you're getting dopamine in new places. So when you go into a fasting lifestyle, if you're finding it difficult and you're falling off track because you want food, every time you get hungry, every time you think, oh, I want the soda, I want the chips, which by the way, Todd was drinking 12 sodas a day and eating buffalo wings and drinking beer with his friends every day. Every time you go after and you want that, what you can do is you can say, okay, I just want dopamine. So reframe it in your mind. It's not the food I want, it's dopamine I want. Where else can I get dopamine? And dopamine can do, find something new, learn a new sport, find a new Netflix series, go onto TV and find a new series could get you excited. But anything new that's novel is going to give you a dopamine rush. Go find the dopamine somewhere else in something really healthy like what I just gave you. Okay, number 3. I think that you'll find if you're struggling with fasting because of food addiction is that the measurements will help. So many people that have come to me with food issues, and I have deep respect for those of you that have eating disorders or you really can't overcome certain food hurdles. And what we've got to do is get you off calorie counting. We've got to get you off of choosing food by your taste bud. We got to get you into measuring blood sugar. And the best thing you can do with that is a CGM. So put a CGM on. If you keep doing fast and failing and then doing fast and failing, which by the way, I hope you know that there's no such thing as a failed fast. But if in your mind, you're like, I'm failing at this, I can't get over my food addiction. I've seen this work really well where people are like, want to do a 3-day water fast and they're really not sure how they're going to make it 3 days. And so we'll put a CGM on them so they can start to see, oh my God, look, my blood sugar's coming down. Or we'll get them doing like Keto Mojo where they can do like a little measurement and they can see where their ketones are going. They're like, oh, my ketones are going up. That gives you motivation. So sometimes doing like a measurement can be really good and keep you focused. Okay, I got to interrupt this video because I have a free guide for you so you can master fasting. It's called A Beginner's Guide to a Fasting Lifestyle. And all you've got to do is click here and you can jump right in. Okay, number 4, how do we deal with this addiction? Is you could journal. Start writing down what is coming up in your mind. Fasting is a true gift to see the inside of your mind. If I could take your relationship between food and you, so your relationship with food, and I could extract it from your brain and reveal it to you and show you, be like, here's where you're getting caught. I would tell you that how you go about identifying that is actually putting yourself into a fasted state. The story I share all the time is for myself, is my mom taught me, and this is no criticism of my mom, but my mom taught me that if you're having a bad day, eat. And she also taught me if you go without food, you will pass out, like you'll be hypoglycemic, which I was for many years until I learned the techniques I'm teaching you. So when I got into fasting, it was really difficult for me because I was like, oh my gosh, what do I do if I feel like I'm going to pass out? And I have this old pattern in my brain that without food, I will pass out. So what do I do? How do I rectify those? And I'm in an emotionally tough spot when I'm fasting. And so what am I going to do now? Because I don't have food to soothe myself. So this is where journaling can help. Just write down what's popping up in your mind. Just write it down and look at it and realize that it's a mirror. It's the moment for you to see your relationship with food. We have very toxic relationships with food in our culture. So fasting will reveal that for you. Journaling it out will help you see so that you're able to make sure that you address those. If you have a therapist, if you listen to the Resetter podcast, I've talked a lot about this. I've even brought my therapist on to the Resetter podcast. I've given you a lot of mental health tools. So make sure you follow my podcast because I'm bringing you a lot of tools that take a little longer to explain. But the way I would use, if I had a food addiction and I was fasting and I saw an aha moment, like, wow, like I had this aha moment, like my mom taught me I was gonna pass out if I didn't have food, then you take it to your therapist and you work it out there. And now you're using fasting as this real tool for mental health and for able to get past your traumas. That's the way I like to look at it. So journal. And then the last one that I want to talk about that I think is really important is fast in a community. If you are struggling to overcome these hurdles as you fast and you just keep falling and you go back to your food addiction, get in a community, gather a bunch of people and fast together. This is why we do fast training weeks every month. This is why we do big 3-day water fasts. And stay tuned if you follow my newsletter. You can subscribe to my newsletter, and anytime we do a big 3-day water fast, I'll let you know. You can come into my Reset Academy. I'll leave those links in the notes here. And we fast as a community because the community support brings up oxytocin. And when we bring up oxytocin, even if we're not all in the same place, we're watching on a computer, or we're in a group in like a platform like Kajabi that we use, or maybe the Resetter Collaborative is a great place. It's a free resource on Facebook. You can go in there, and we've got 60,000 people there that gather and talk about fasting. But we realize that community is really important for fasting results. So we've created a lot of avenues for you to be able to lean into these communities. And again, what I'm going to say is that if you've had a food addiction, if you've failed at fasting and you've used any of these foods, can you please put in the comments which one of these worked, other hacks you may have found, so that we can all learn from them. And please, everybody go into the comments and read it. The comments, if you're not aware of this, with my videos, we've got, not only what you're watching right now, but research studies I put in the notes, and then I often ask comments so that we can learn from each other. We are stronger together. So, as always, I hope that helps. Okay, so if you love this video, you're going to want to check out the next video in my fasting series. I know that fasting helps you lose weight without changing your food, but if you're intermittent fasting and gaining weight, then I really recommend that you look at 3 food changes.